I save the world.
Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us. Of course, I want to welcome those of you who are watching the prepared video now on one of our many video platforms, YouTube or BitChute or Rumble. Please subscribe to whatever channel you're watching this on. And come back and watch all of our videos. We're really happy that you are doing that. And please consider joining the healing team of the Community Miracle Center if you are not already a member. Just email me and I will tell you about it. Remember, A Course in Miracles says the healing of God's child is all that the world is for. So this is a real opportunity to really participate with a group of dedicated healers in an organized way, just to do that every single day. So talk to me about joining the healing team. Title of my talk today, Challenging the Ego's Drive to Separate. Challenging the ego's drive to separate. I want to start by quoting the great Betty Davis in the movie All About Eve. Fasten your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy night. Or day, as the case may be. And as she said bumpy night, she didn't say bumpy ride. It frequently gets misquoted as bumpy ride, but fasten your seatbelts. It's gonna be a bumpy night. Many of the things I may talk about today may challenge you, may upset you. Maybe they won't, maybe they will. It's okay though. Whatever happens, it's okay. Sometimes it's the minister's job to challenge people. Okay, challenging the ego's drive to separate. What I've really noticed lately is just how all-pervasive this is and how I see it just reflected in the world everywhere. It'd be convenient to try to blame it on particular things or institutions like the government or the World Economic Forum. But what I see is it's just really everywhere. So the only place that it must be coming from is my mind, because my mind is projecting the world that we see. So I see it as all pervasive, and I see it as, even in many of the things that we might think of as good things, underneath it is this agenda of separation. And I see it from the left, and I see it from the right. Nothing is immune. You know, actually the ego's whole motto is divide and conquer. So the ego is really continually trying to just separate us, break us apart. So I'm going to just talk about some of these things today. Okay, there's a current narrative that is going on out there, and it seems sweet. It seems benign. Actually, it seems sweet and positive. Maybe you've heard it. And that's that many people, some people, prefer the relationships they have with their furry animal friends to the relationships they have with people. In fact, they're choosing their animal friends to relate to as the closest relationships that they have, and they feel they don't need to have relationships with people anymore or ever because they have animals. And it sounds sweet. And they say kind of sometimes sort of derogatory, nasty things about relationships with people. But, you know, the animals just love them unconditionally. Oh, if only people would love them so unconditionally. And I just want to, I have nothing against animals. I actually like animals a lot. I had a dog for many years of my life. I've had people who worked in the office who had dogs and brought the dogs to the office. I loved the dogs in the office. I would take the dogs for walks sometimes. It's not appropriate to call them pets anymore. That's actually kind of a politically incorrect term. And the people who have the little furry friends, they're not called owners anymore either. That's a politically incorrect term. I think the correct term now is parents. See, we've elevated these furry friends to the level of people. So, of course, we can have our relationships with our furry friends. But the part of this that bothers me is it encourages people not to have relationships with people. It separates us. We need to have relationships with people. We certainly can have relationships with animals. That's fine. And I know you love your animals, and your animals love you. But people are kind of nice to relate to. And I think, when A Course in Miracles talks about salvation through relationships, I think it's mostly referring to other people. Of course, we have relationships with our animals. I understand. But let's not rule out relationships with people as a source of our salvation. The Course in Miracles says, your brothers are everywhere. You do not have to seek far for salvation. So, I had a dog. I called him my pet dog. I mean, that was back in the day when you could say the word pet and people wouldn't jump all over you. But I never thought of my dog as my chosen relationship partner. It was my dog. And I enjoyed my dog. And hopefully my dog enjoyed me. Actually, I don't think I was the greatest owner or parent. Oops. But I did my best I could at the time. And my dog lived a healthy, long life. So, I challenge that narrative. And every time I see it, I cringe a little bit. I think it's good for us to have relationships with people. It's good for us not to separate from people. I'm challenging that ego desire to separate. There's another narrative going on right now. It's just, and I'm sure all of you have heard this one, it's just about basically how terrible men are. Men are just terrible, aren't they? I mean, there's toxic masculinity. And they just want to control and push their weight around. And look at how they've ruined the world. Men have been in charge mostly for hundreds of years. Look at what a terrible state the world is in. It's all men's fault. We need more women. Maybe we need no men leaders. We just need all women leaders. And yada, yada. And it just goes on and on. And it gets a little laugh and it gets a little nod. And people sort of think, well, this part of that is true. Really? Is that real? Are men really bad? Are men really toxic? Is masculinity really toxic? It just causes people to be afraid of each other. It causes women not to want to relate to men. It causes some men not to want to relate to other men too. And it drives this terrible wedge between men and women. And I see it. I feel it. I see it in our entertainment. I see it in our music videos. I see it everywhere. It's just sort of this like men and women kind of constantly battling. I remember Deuce Althea and I, who's my partner, we would go to this Indian-Pakistani restaurant. And the Indian-Pakistani restaurant had a big TV. And they would be showing Bollywood musicals, which are amazing musicals. So they would be showing this. And I would look at the Bollywood musicals, and I just noticed an energetic difference between the way men and women relate in those musicals. And I would tell Deuce Althea, you look at that, the men and women in these musicals, in this culture, they don't hate each other. They seem to actually like each other. They like each other. And then it just became really obvious how our whole culture has embraced this idea that men and women are at odds. And now this is morphed into men are toxic and masculinity is toxic and men have ruined everything. Is this really the value that we want? In A Course in Miracles, and it was in that reading that Lucky read so wonderfully, it says, to learn this course requires willingness to question every value that you hold. Not one can be kept hidden and obscure, but it will jeopardize your learning. So we have to question these things, and I think we have to be really vigilant about it. We have to be really vigilant about ideas, even if they're widely accepted, and even if they cause us maybe to chuckle a little bit. We got to really question them and reject them if at their core and at their foundation they speak of separation or they're promoting separation. If people think men are toxic, they won't want to relate to them, or they'll relate to them defensively. which is what I always see in, in our entertainment, and it wasn't as obvious, or it wasn't there in those Bollywood musicals that I was looking at. So we got to challenge the ego's drive to separate with consistent vigilance to join. We need consistent vigilance to join. Joining should always be what we are choosing. Let me get back to the animal friends here for a minute. People choosing animals and relating to animals instead, and as a replacement to relating to people. So, come on. You control every aspect of your animal's life. You tell your animal where to sleep, you tell them when to sleep, you tell them where to eat, you tell them what to eat, you tell them when to run, where to run. You frequently have them on a leash. You tell them where to pee, when to pee. You certainly tell them where to poop and when to poop. Come on, you control their every move. So when you say you prefer that relationship over relationships with people, yeah, because you can't control people's every move. Come on, you prefer the relationship where you're the master and you only relate to your little slaves? Yeah, if that's what you get used to, your relationships with people aren't going to work that well because people don't put up with it. People have their own lives and their own ideas, and that's why we should be relating to people, because there are equals. The animals aren't truly your equal, and you don't treat them like your equal. Yeah, they unconditionally love you, and you unconditionally love them, but look at the power dynamic and differential between your relationship with your animals and your relationships with people. Do you really need relationships where you control every aspect of the relationship? That's a problem. And that's going to keep you separate. So I'm challenging that. And we need to be vigilant to want relationships with people, whatever they are, however intimate we are open to being with them. People want freedom. You want freedom. And we need to learn how to relate to other free people. Okay, let's move on. During the COVID-19 pandemic, one of my favorite topics, hey, I heard that the pandemic is over. Did you hear that? That was news this week. The pandemic is over. I actually found out that California officially ends the COVID-19 emergency at the end of this month, February. And that President Biden has now said that the COVID-19 emergency for the United States of America will end on May 11th. So this emergency, this 15 days to flatten the curve, lasted 3 years or more in the case of the USA. I talked about this a couple of years ago. Hey, come on, emergencies are short by definition. That's what makes them emergencies. If an emergency lasts for 3 years, it's not an emergency. It's your steady state. It's normal. Okay, so they're just going to try to find another emergency. They want to declare a climate emergency. Oh, there's one. That can last for decades, maybe even centuries. We could have century-long emergencies. Woohoo! Okay, so the COVID-19 pandemic. So, we were told, what were we told during the COVID-19 pandemic? We were told to isolate, to separate, to shelter in place, to wear masks, to stand 6 feet apart, to avoid crowded stores. Don't go to church or other public gatherings. Don't go to church for sure. They sing in church. Oh, they sing out loud and they spew droplets of saliva everywhere when they sing. Oh, how yuck. You can't be around that. Family gatherings, no more than 9 people, only representing 2 households at the most. Everybody should have a test before they go. Before we had the test, we had to take everybody's temperature, make sure nobody with any kind of body temperature elevated would come in. I mean, think about all of this massive push to separate ourselves. People are trying to forget about this. I think the government would like us to forget about it. Uh, I'm not quite willing to let go of the awareness of what our institutions pushed on us. I don't think it was healthy. I got a little screen share I want to show you of an image that we were shown during the pandemic. Yes, this is how we were to tell if we were the appropriate distance from one another. Maybe this was a mother and a daughter who could only talk 6 feet apart with the masks on. Stay separate. Separation was what was going to save us. Yeah, well, did separation save us? No. Just about everybody eventually got COVID. One way or another. It didn't really stop anybody from getting COVID. Many scientists knew that you can't stop a virus with you can't stop an airborne virus with these kind of mitigation strategies. You might be able to delay it a bit, but eventually, you just can't keep this up for that long, and everybody is going to get it, or most people are going to get it, and that is indeed what happened. So, our elected leaders wanted more control over our lives. They wanted to control our every move. I wonder where they learned this. Maybe they have animal friends and they're used to relating to people like they do their animal friends. You control their every move. And they wanted to do that with us. We have to question those values. Question every value. And I'm going to keep reminding myself of it, maybe a few people of it, because I don't want it to happen again. Okay, we're moving out of it. The emergency seems to be ending. I don't ever want to go through something like that again, especially when it was actually not effective at all, and it had incredibly dire consequences to mental health and health in general. The obesity rate went up. The diabetes rate went up. They stopped people from going to gyms when going to gyms and exercising and being healthy might have been just what they needed to strengthen their immune system so they could handle COVID when they inevitably got it, which they inevitably all did anyway. So we have to question these things, and we have to be vigilant to always consistently choose for joining, not separating. Separating is never going to be the answer. I grew up with the myth of overpopulation. When I was, a young impressionable person, I was shown those population curves where the population of the world was increasing exponentially, and we were going to run out of resources and food, shortly. I grew up with that myth. It never really happened. They've been predicting that. Wasn't it the economist Malthus? Didn't he predict that 100 plus years ago? No, 200 years ago. I don't know, a long time ago. I didn't look up Malthus's date. But I bought into that, quite a bit. And it probably had some effect on me why I chose a lifestyle where I didn't choose to have children. I never particularly wanted to have children, but I do think it probably influenced me in that direction when I was an impressionable age to be continually told that the population was exploding in this exponential rate and we were going to run out of resources and it was going to be dire catastrophes all over the planet. Well, you know what's going on now? The birth rate is so low in many countries that they're having to do all kinds of things to encourage people to have children because their populations are declining. And they don't have enough people to work. They don't have enough people to fill their labor force. Okay, case in point, the country of Hungary. Hungary is a country of about 10 million people. Central Europe or Eastern Europe, possibly. The birth rate's not high enough, so the government has instituted all kinds of measures to get people to breed, to get people to have children. So you know what they've instituted? They have instituted that if you are a woman in your 20s and if you have a child, you will not have to pay income taxes in Hungary. And that's not just you don't pay income taxes for the year that you have your child. That's not just that you don't pay income taxes for your 20s. You won't pay income taxes for the rest of your life if you are a woman and you have a child. You give birth to a child when you are in your 20s. So these are the kind of drastic measures that countries are doing because their populations are declining and they don't have enough people in the labor force. I mean, that's a long game solution because obviously when a baby is born, it's going to be about 20 years before they enter the labor force. So they're playing the long game. I'll give them credit for that. But this is what is going on. Populations are declining. I've heard it said that one of the reasons that we're letting so many people in through the border is because we need the workers. You know, our native population, our birth rate is too low. And actually we need this influx of people just to keep our labor market stable. You know, you don't hear that too often, but I have seen it. And we need to think about it. We need to question this value. These things that we hear, the population increasing at an exponential rate, resources are running out. I mean, the ego spins all kinds of things like this. We need to question these values. You know, I think we need, as a whole, to think about joining together, men and women, to have children. It's a good thing. Might have been a good thing for me. Didn't do it. I know I've talked with my sister Sarah, who's here today. Maybe she'll comment. You know, she's also a person who chose not to have any children. But lately, in these years that she is in now, she kind of wishes she did have some children. Maybe some grandchildren to help her when she needs a little help. Or needs some help with some technical things. Maybe some grandchildren around would be great. Okay, the AIDS epidemic just about stopped the sexual revolution in its tracks. Sexual revolution been going on for decades. I kind of viewed it as a pretty positive thing. And the AIDS epidemic came along. Oh God. Now, bodies joining to have adult fun and intimacy were going to kill you. It was deadly. Talk about something that would curb the birth rate. That one definitely would. But it also just like stymies people getting together, people joining, people having fun together, people relating to each other. You relate intimately, sexually with someone, you have to navigate. You have to learn how to talk and communicate and relate. Real different than having furry friends. It's a different kind of relating. These are relationship skills that probably we all really need. But we've made, you know, I just know a lot of people, they've made the whole idea of being sexual actually really so remote and even distasteful. And the spiritual community is terrible with this because we've made it unspiritual. It's so unspiritual. You know, I've always been a kind of a sex positive person. I get a lot of flack with that. And I get a lot of people who use it to kind of tell me how I'm not nearly as enlightened as maybe I'd like to present myself because, you know, I'm a sex positive person, so I'm still identifying with my body and I'm still seeking after body play, and it just goes on and on and on. But in my mind, sexual relations or relating intimately with people is a really good thing, and it gives us relationship skills, and it gives us salvation. And you know, there's another thing that doesn't get talked about a lot. People who are in the game, so to speak, of relating sexually, they take a little better care of their bodies, at least they try to. They tend to, you know, try to eat better, try to exercise. They want to have the vitality and the strength to be involved with sexual activity, and they also want to look their best so they can be attractive to their mates and partners. So, I mean, there's a lot of just positive aspects to staying sexually active, and we've demonized it. You know, the whole culture has demonized it. The spiritual movement has demonized it. And it's not helping our birth rate any. Let's face it. Um, I think about, the birth rate going down. Who else wants to reduce the birth rate? Well, the global elite at the World Economic Forum, they really want to reduce the birth rate. You know, think about those kind of things and how those kind of things might be related. These agendas, I mean, they're all ego driven. They're our egos, but they keep people apart. They're not healthy, and we need to challenge them because we need to be vigilant for joining. They want us to drive electric cars. California is going to make it illegal soon to drive a gas-powered cars. Well, what's the thing about electric cars? Electric cars, kind of have a limited range. You can't drive too far. You got to drive to a charging station, then leave it for a while to charge. It really slows down long travel. Also, electric cars are really difficult for urban environments. I don't live in a place. I don't have a garage. I don't have any place, in my home or next to my home where I can plug in an electric car. I'd have to go to a charging station. So the whole, conceptualization of driving, especially for an urban person, is changing drastically. Well, what does that do? That keeps us sheltered, it keeps us limited, it keeps us not joining, it keeps us separate. Challenge these things. I don't know what the answer is, but keeping people close to home and limited and contained in a small space, I don't think that is the answer. Big drive to move to rural America. Move to rural America. Cities are terrible. Cities are unlivable. I still have occasional people, communicating with me and telling me, when are you going to move out of San Francisco? And I say, I guess I'll move out when I'm guided to. I've not been guided to yet. I pretty much love living in San Francisco, and, it's not unlivable. I live here. I know a lot of people who live here. Certainly not unlivable. And then they talk about the high crime in cities. Well, if you look at statistics, per capita, there might be some argument that the crime is a little higher in cities per capita than it is in rural areas, but it's not that much. The crime rate per person, per population, is pretty similar, urban and rural. And there's actually some recent studies that in Canada showed that the crime rate in rural areas was higher than the crime rate in urban areas. So, that's something to think about too. Keeping people apart, keeping people separate. Is this what we want? All of these agendas that get touted to control our behavior. Global warming. Okay, so the globe is warming. I don't want to argue that the globe is warming, but when I first started hearing about global warming, I thought, well, the last ice age ended about 16,000 years ago. There were numerous ice ages, and it was always a global warming that ended the ice ages. So what caused the last ice age to end 16,000 years ago? Was it because we were all eating too many burgers? I don't think so. We weren't even here. Mankind didn't cause any of those massive global warmings. Why are we so sure that it's man that's causing this global warming? Maybe he's contributing to it, but hey, the globe warms and cools in its own kind of cycle. That's what it's always done. I learned that in grammar school science. We got to question these things that try to control us, to try to keep us separate. Don't drive, global warming. Eat crickets. That'll be good. I saw a video of Nicole Kidman eating some grasshoppers, fried grasshoppers. She had a whole bowl. These are so good. That's great, Nicole. You eat your fried grasshoppers. Let me tell you, fried anything with a little salt tastes good. That's all. Fried tastes good. So, I'm not eating fried grasshoppers unless I absolutely have to, and I don't think that's happening. I intend to keep eating the food that I eat and living the life that I live. I'm going to resist these separation narratives. I'm going to challenge the ego's drive to separate us with consistent vigilance for joining and living a fun, dynamic, powerful life. You know, furry friends are great. They're not substitutes for people. Men are not terrible. Masculinity is not toxic. Breathing's not dangerous. I don't have to stand 6 feet apart from anybody. If I'm going to choose to get sick, I'll probably choose to get sick. It doesn't matter whether I'm 6 feet apart from somebody or not. I think church is a great thing. I can't wait to be back in-person settings, and I'm going to sing right out, and yes, there may be some moisture spraying from my mouth, but saliva's not necessarily a terrible thing. Being sexual is fun, it's natural, it's life-affirming, and it's healthy, and it's what we need to do if we want to keep our population stable. Having children is a wonderful right path for many people. They should be encouraged to do it. And I'm going to be consistent about my vigilance to join and resist these ego narratives to separate. Okay, that's my talk for today. Thank you.
Open my eyes to see, woke up my head to peace, woke up my heart to be free, woke up our world, you and me. I've opened up my heart, I'm at the start. I save the world, I save the world, I save the world, I save